This is the Brown & Sharpe #2 universal horizontal light type milling machine from 1947. We had to take this thing apart for a couple of reasons. It was sitting unused for a really long time, and so we thought we'd just make sure everything's good inside. But this sight glass, when the machine is running, there's supposed to be oil flowing through there. There was none. The Z vertical rapid feed was not working. Maybe a clutch was slipping. All else was fine. The spindle was fine. The electric seemed to be okay, but we just wanted to take it apart and make sure everything was good. And so that's what this video is kind of about. I started filming once we took it all apart, so this video is about how to put it back together for the most part. I dropped the knee gearbox out at the bottom of the knee, and I guess we'll start from about there. This is the gearbox that selects power feed speeds that lives inside of the knee of the Brown & Sharpe milling machine. There's two things that's kind of going on in here. One is the powertrain itself, which connects the motor, which fits right in here, to the output shaft of this gearbox. And the output shaft goes into the mill, or into the knee of the mill, and then all three axes gear off of that shaft. So basically, for the powertrain, this is the input and this is the output. What's special about this is you can select 18 speeds through this train of gears right here, or you could do rapid feed, which happens right here. So let's talk about the speed selection. First, there's the speed selection handle that's like sticking out the front of the mill, and that drives an axle that fits into this splined hole right here. So when you turn that speed selection knob, it'll turn this. And this will turn this gear train, obviously, but it'll also, come around back, it'll spin these three things right here. I don't know what they're called, but these will turn.
Like a shifter.
Shifters, yeah. And the position of where the slot is in the shifters will cause these shoes to move, which will push the gears around and link whichever gear is selected on the knob up front. Here's the input of this transmission here. It comes out of the motor, goes first through this shaft, and then to this shaft, and then to this shaft, and then to the output gear here. And right now it's in slow speed, because you can see from the input shaft right there, it's got small gear to big gear, and then next it's got small gear to big gear, and then next it's got small to big. Okay, you can put it over to fast speed right there, and now the input has got big gear to small gear, and then big-ish gear to small gear, even though it's not. But it's the biggest gear to the smallest gear in this little area section, and then big gear to small gear, and that's the fastest you can do. Now you can see when you turn the input, then the output goes real fast, that's about as fast as it gets. Cool. So that's the feed selection part. Next, we could talk about the powertrain. So you can have, I'm gonna move it over back to slow speed real quick. So first of all, the motor can turn without power feed being engaged. Let's go to the other side. So the motor can turn without power feed being actually engaged. So when you engage power feed, there's a solenoid somewhere in the knee that'll cause this lever here to get pushed in. And so when the motor is spinning and this is not pushed in, everything will turn freely. So this is the output, right? And nothing is linked. So the output of the transmission is turning at its prescribed speed, but the output of the gearbox itself is not linked to the output of the transmission. Okay, until that solenoid pushes this guy in. So engage power feed right there. And now Here, you can come over here and look at this clutch here. So when I push this lever, that'll cause this little clutch here to mesh in, linking the output of the transmission to the output of the gearbox. So now this gear is whatever speed your transmission is set at. And then I'll release that power feed engage, and then that clutch will pop out, leaving this gear to turn freely. Nice. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then there's one more thing. There's the rapid feed. So the rapid feed, there's one knob on the front of the knee that causes this shoe to be pushed this way. And a couple things happen when this shoe is pushed. For one, you could see here, if this is pushed over, there's no way for this clutch to engage, because obviously it can't, because it's getting blocked by this shoe here. So if, for example, power feed is engaged there, and you want to turn on rapid feed, it'll push that clutch out like that. But the other, and now this gear will be linked to the fastest speed of the motor by means of this clutch here, not by this clutch. This is the output of the transmission to output of the gearbox clutch. And this clutch here is the output, the fast speed of the motor to output clutch. And you can kind of see it when I move this back and forth.
For rapid feed only.
For rapid feed only, yeah. So the fast gear of the fast speed of the motor will be linked right to the output of the gearbox, bypassing the rest of this.
And this is why
clutch.
we have this out, was because the rapid feed on the Z was, the clutch was slipping and it wouldn't work.
Yeah, so all three directions worked, but the Z wouldn't go up.
Right, from the weight.
Because it was really heavy, and that made us think that maybe a clutch was slipping. So the clutch that was slipping was the rapid feed clutch. That's right here. And so, yeah, when you move the power feed in and out, that engages and disengages that clutch in there. Yeah, so now you could tighten it up. It describes how to do it in the manual pretty well.
Yeah, there's all those little serrations that you see on the side, inside of there, are the adjustment, like a castle nut, but with a clip.
Yeah. So we tightened it up a little bit, and now hopefully it won't slip when you go Z up. Okay, so that gearbox fits inside of here, and that gear right there is the one that meshes into the output of that transmission feed case. And that gear is on this axle right there. That's how you access the axle. We can't figure out how to pull that axle out, but so when you engage power feed, like the X power feed, Y power feed, or Z power feed, will mesh the various ball screws to that axle. So we didn't make any videos of taking that feed case out of this mill, so I'm just going to show you how to put it back in. So there's a couple things that you have to do before you take the feed case out of the machine. One, you got to pull this shaft out a little bit, and two, you have to take the motor off. The reason why they want you to take this shaft out is because this shaft comes down through here, and then that splined ending on that shaft goes into the feed case right there, and it actually meshes right into this hole. So you can't take this gearbox out unless nothing is meshing into this hole. Hence why you got to pull this guy out a little bit. And once you get the pins out, this collar right here is the thing that meshes with this the visual wheel. This doesn't do anything, it just connects to this. But the thing that actually comes out is the little end bit, and it should just slide easily. The first time I took it out, it was really greasy and nasty, and I just grabbed it with some vice grips and pulled it, and it came right out. Okay, so the next thing that they want you to do is make sure you know what speed the machine is set to before. The reason for that is you want this wheel to line up with whatever gear this is set to. So in theory, it doesn't really matter which speed you're set at, just as long as they're both the same. And you can change it. It's just by changing this bigger shaft, which is sometimes a little heavy. So I'm just gonna go ahead and set it to the lowest rate. I'm also gonna let this hole right there be up at the top. I'm also gonna let this little notch right here, the end of the smaller shaft, also be at the top. And when we push this shaft all the way back into the transmission feed case, everything should line up. So that hole should line up with this hole, should line up with the top of this notch. So because this is set at the lowest speed and everything's lined up, we gotta set this guy to the lowest speed and make sure everything's lined up. So the way we do that is we gotta note that the gear train goes small to big, small to big, small to big. We also have to make sure that this pin here is at the top, because that will make sure that everything lines up properly. And don't forget that they want you to take the motor out first, and that will be really clear why when we put the motor back in. Okay, gearbox is in there. I can't remember if they say this in the manual or not, but you cannot lower the knee in until you make sure that this lever in there, you probably can't see it here, but there's a lever in there that engages the power feed, and that is the one that pushes on this guy. It's the solenoid that pushes on there. And you have to make sure that's out of the way before you try to lower the knee all the way back down onto the feed case. So this box has the solenoid that engages the power feed clutch. So I'm gonna open up this little case here. Okay, so this is the solenoid that engages power feed. And so this has got to be kept in the up position to get that lever out of the way. So this guy is the rapid feed, and that, the one on the right, and that meshes with this, which we talked about is the rapid feed clutch. And the one on the left is this, the solenoid actuated power feed engage, and that pushes on this. So we got to keep this up out of the way. Perfect. So gasket, new gasket is in, making sure all those holes are lined up. Old gasket is out, motor is out, solenoid is jacked up, oil pump and filter are removed. Half inch inches per minute selected on there and on there. Spline shaft is pulled and lined up. I think we're ready to lower the knee. Okay, now that the knee is almost all the way down, it's time to worry about these locator pins. You can see we're, I don't know if you can see, it looks like we're about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch off. So I'm gonna go off camera and try to get everything lined up. We were having issues getting the pins to line up, so we strapped the feed case to the knee, raised the whole thing up, putting it back on shims so that we have more access to see if we can get these pins to line up. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Brown and Sharpe user manual says that you can only shim it up 1.5 inches. That's because you only have about 1.5 inches of clearance once the knee is all the way at the top to slide the feed case in. But once it's already in, I found that you can jack it up as high as you want, put it on 4x6x6 blocks or whatever, so that you have more access to put these bolts in. Okay, we finally got those pins lined up, and it was kind of really hard. Making sure it was all level was really helpful. So now that it's in there, time to put the bolts in. Okay, I got most of those bolts in. I'm gonna raise the knee up and pull out all that hardware so that we can have more access to the rest of the screws. Also have both of the oil plugs go into the bottom here. Another something to think about when you put that back in is that this rapid feed, if the feed case isn't going in there well, might as well try to wiggle this around and get the power feed shoe to sit in its slot. Okay, making sure it's all lined up. Slot, hole, hole. Let's just go right in. Nice. Don't forget to take out this block, because if you leave that in, that could be a problem. So that's engaging and disengaging the power feed. There.
There's chips maybe on that screw.
I think it's probably okay. Just okay, you may have noticed that the electric is off of this motor. The reason is that we could take the motor off, of course. I didn't close this box up yet because maybe it will be easier to access these conduit nuts later to tighten them up. So to get the motor in there, oh yeah, when you take off the motor, make sure you label where those wires went to. That's 13, 12, and I guess the last one I didn't mark. In terms of the state of these wires, this machine is from 1947, I believe. And these are a little bit crusty, but they're not that crusty. So I'm not gonna do anything with them. These are totally fine. These are the winding leads themselves. They go right to the windings without any sort of block or something to terminate them off again. So they'd be pretty challenging to replace, but they look okay. But these are fine, and they go all the way back through this leash into the case, the electrical cabinet. So, yeah, let's get this conduit back in there. there's a hole in there to the right where this hole aligns with, so line up that hole with the right. These are total pain to put in. Okay, I think everything is done. Just a little more, that's good. Nice, nice. On, forward,
Spindle.
So for power food, we got X, Y, Z, X right and left, Y in and out, Z up and down, and rapid feed for all three, any of the axes that are engaged. So for example, you can have X go left, Y go in, Z go down. And when you turn on the spindle, all of those axes will move, and you can rapid feed all of them with that guy right there. And something cool about this machine is that all of the hand wheels, you have to press in the clutch in order to make the hand wheels actually move the axis. And when you engage the power feed for that axis, that clutch will pop out, and then the handle will turn freely. All three axes have dogs. These guys, which are automatic stops, so you can set your limits wherever you want them to be set. So for example, if you're moving the table right on power feed, this dog will run into this actuator and stop the power feed from happening. And so obviously those are for the X on the table, and these are for the Z on the knee, and for the Y, they're right here.